going to have a huge problem on our hands in 10 or 20 years.
Industry's not really set up to be a housing alternative play as much as it is a commodities play.
Hey, Fazul, how's things in Dubai?
Today, ladies and gentlemen, this is a red flag alert coming to my Canadian investors, and this is going to be a learning lesson for you U.S. investors. So sit down, listen up. This is crazy important stuff, so let's jump right into this. This is very important. Welcome back, my passive income investors. And this information comes to you by me digging into the Canadian housing market, trying to find a property or real estate that I could possibly own or rent out. And I recently have been talking about how the government will pay you interest-free to buy a home. Literally, they will give you up to the majority. If you come up with 5% of the down payment, they'll cover the rest of it, all the way up to a $500,000 home. And this program comes live at the beginning of September, with the first homes being approved for it at the beginning of November. And I've learned something crucial here that has terrified me to no end. I've been digging around and I've come to the conclusion that there are serious corruptions going on inside of this country, and it burdens me immensely because I live here. Now, if you live in the US, let me ask you, what does a house cost? I mean, seriously, what does a nice house cost? $200,000, $300,000? You get something pretty decent, right? Well, think about, come to Canada. The average condo right now, just the condo, maybe like 800 square feet, is $500,000 in Toronto. Now, I'm going to tell you why, because you might say, well, look at New York. New York's crazy expensive too, and you can compare it to all these different places. But the fact of the matter is the condo market has been one of the most explosive markets in Canada alone. Compared to everywhere else in the world, it has been growing more in Canada, or specifically in Toronto. I'm going to explain to you why. I'm going to tell you why there's been corruption around this and why it has led us down this horrific road that makes it really hard for people like me to buy a home. Now, I have a six-figure bank account. Many of you guys know I've got about $120,000 in assets, give or take. And I could literally go to the States and outright afford to buy a home almost with the conversions in Florida, Texas. You can pick up decent homes in the States for anywhere from $100,000 to $200,000. In Canada here, a decent home, not a condo, a decent home is about 1.5 to 1.8 million. Even with the US conversion, that would still be a $1.3 million home, guys. I want you to just let that sink in for a bit. I work my ass off. I've done really well for myself, and it burdens me that I can't own a home or buy something that makes feasible sense to rent. And I want to tell you where the corruption comes in and why this 20% tax really matters. So we're going to come back to this in a second. But first of all, Canada didn't have a lot of good policies on foreign investing for a very long time. And that's why this tax came in 2016. If you are a foreign buyer from China, Russia, anywhere really, you were going to pay a 20% capital gain tax on any properties you purchase. And what that has caused is it's called mitigation in people coming to Canada to buy properties. In the US and in other parts of the world, they have laws against people coming in from countries buying properties and investment properties, because some of that can lead to corruption. And in Canada, we didn't have good policy against this. So what happened was we had Russians, Chinese, everybody coming into our country, flooding in, buying up the condos in mass amounts and flipping them, doing cheap deals. Glass was falling out of the skies. It's become a nightmare in Toronto. It really has. And this has caused a massive fluctuation in housing prices. To put this in perspective, guys, the average house or the average condo in Toronto in 2000 was worth $200,000, which was already expensive considering that was almost 20 years ago. But when we look at the rate of inflation or the rate of return, it's absolutely astronomical, because essentially, well, you're doubling your money pretty much every 10 years. But when we add the numbers up and we look down the road, that means in the next 10 years, the average condos probably should cost about $1.2 million, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So when you run those numbers and you're trying to figure out why that happened, well, because in 2016, the government finally stepped up and they saw the corruption and foreign money coming in, because essentially what you could do is create a company here, cost a couple $100s to incorporate. I could find some guy in Russia that wants to own investment property here. He'd give me the money. The government wouldn't even know where that money came from in Canada. And then that basically the brokers would go and buy these new condo builds. They'd buy like 5 or 10 units for these foreign investors, and then they would flip them the day they went live. And now we have this weird fluctuation of the majority of the condo markets in Toronto are owned by foreign investors or investment properties, or for investment properties. So they're just vehicles for corruption, because that's when you start getting mobsters, really corrupt things going on. To put it in perspective, my girlfriend's neighbor doesn't live in this country. They bought a home for $1.8 million. Crazy. It's a staggering number, right? They put $100,000 into fixing it up, and then they tried to flip it for $2.1 million. Well, that never happened. 2 years went by. I'm still dating my girlfriend, and that house finally got sold for $1.48 million, I think. So they definitely took a massive loss on that, but I guarantee they're not paying any capital gain tax from our government. But ever since the government stepped in 2016 and said, look, we're done with this. We can't keep having this happen because people that actually live in this country can't afford homes. I work my ass off. I have a ton of money, and I can't afford a home. It's crazy to me that I can retire in Thailand and I can afford to outright own a home in the U.S., but in Canada here, I can't even prosper. It's quite a shame, really. But what this has led to is it's led to a cooling in the housing market, and we've seen housing start to correct. It's actually come down about 15 or 20%, and it fluctuates a little bit, but it's actually been holding steady and staying down. And I think what the government has come to realize is that they can't afford a crash. The banks can't afford a crash. The government can't afford a crash. Things are very stretched here right now for a lot of people. The average wage, because I got so flustered by trying to figure out why the government is going to give $50 billion, 50 billion, try to imagine that number, $50 billion the government is going to give to individuals like myself to buy properties for first-time home buyers. Now, I kept asking myself, why are they doing this? They're literally going to give you free property. They're increasing the RSP limit so you can withdraw even more against your RSP to buy a house. Why are they doing this? Is it to help me? That's what I thought. I thought they were trying to help people buy homes. But now that I look at the big picture, I started analyzing how much people made, like actually made in this country. And in Markham, one of the most expensive places along with Toronto to live, the average income is $80,000 a year. So if a full household was working, the max they could be making is $160,000 a year before taxes. And that didn't make sense to me that how are these people affording these multi-million-dollar homes? Well, I've come to the conclusion that they're not, and the ones that are so stretched, if one of them lost their jobs, they'd probably lose their property. So I've come to realize that the government has I think the government has finally stepped up to the conclusion that millennials aren't buying homes. They'll never be able to afford them. They're in student loan debt. And the problem is we have an oversurge of renters also rising the housing market. And we have foreign investors that have overjacked and overhauled the entire country into a state of insanity. It's absolutely crazy here. So what I think is going to happen, I don't think this $50 billion is to help me. I think it's to help the friggin' country. I honestly think the country's coming to a dead wall soon, and to mitigate the crash, this is a 5-year program, by the way. This $50 billion is going to be spread out over 5 years, and I think they're using it to try and cushion the blow. They make a very broad statement in there that says, basically, if the money they give you for this house is interest-free, but you have to pay it back over 25 years, or sell the house, whatever comes first, and then they'll take the percentage of, if you just sell the house, they'll take the percentage back, but it's all interest-free money. They don't take any interest on it, and they literally state that we do the ups and the downs with you. So the house goes down while we lose our money too. But I think they're doing this just because they want to mitigate the crash that is literally about to come. I think they know that millennials aren't going to be buying homes. People that live in this country can't even afford the homes here, and we're all just renting, trying to get by. And the government has come to the conclusion that, look, we know that things are going to start slowing down. If you look at the stock market here, this is where money's come to die. Money is coming to Canada to die, in my personal opinion. The markets have been bleak at best. We've lost a ton of oil industry. Our housing market is on the brink of destruction. And the government, I think, is doing this as an emergency. I think they're literally going to give people money to buy homes to cushion the blow and start leveling off the housing market. And I think over the next 5 years, we're going to see housing slowly start to peter down and level out, unless there's some loopholes that I'm missing that are allowing people to get through this 20% tax for foreign income buyers. So I think if foreign buyers, I don't know what the whole stipulations are, but people are intelligent. There's always loopholes, and it wouldn't surprise me if foreign buyers are still buying homes here like there's no tomorrow, and they're avoiding this 20% tax. But this 20% tax has scared away a ton of home buyers. On top of that, China is doing incentives now to get them to come back to China to buy homes, because China wants to be the dominating power by 2025. So they're literally trying to get all the money to come back to those countries, which means we're going to start seeing it come out of these countries, these insanely expensive countries, guys. This is some crazy facts, and the conclusion that I've honestly come to, guys, is I would keep your cash on the sidelines and only invest it in assets you really understand. It blows my mind, like I said, that I can go down to Florida and outright own a home for $150,000. I can go to Vegas and buy a brand new condo for what, $200,000, $300,000 at the most. Even with the conversion, we ain't talking about these numbers here, guys. I've been looking at properties all over Ontario, and I've come to the conclusion that I want to be in a position where I know I can buy a house and get approved for one, but I am not going to be in a rush to buy a home whatsoever at this point. If anything, I'm going to start looking for foreign homes, or just patiently awaiting a really large correction or just the right deal to come up. So what I'm going to do is put myself in a situation where I will be able to get approved, but trust me, do not rush any decisions you might make today. You are better off renting today than you are owning. In fact, if you run the numbers on most properties people are renting, they're not even making a positive cash flow. They're literally making just enough to cover the mortgage. This is what I have come to realize, and I've had a hard time buying investment properties because I want to buy something I can rent, but when I run the numbers, they don't make sense because I don't make anything. And I've come to realize a lot of other people in the markets today, and including the realtors that I deal with, have told me that, look, they really look at the speculative aspect of real estate, because they said if real estate keeps doing what it's doing, you can't just look at the fact that you're not making, you might be making 1 or 2% on your cash, but you also have to look at your speculative value. And I told them I don't want to do that. I do not want to buy a home based off speculative value, which just means I'm presuming in 5 years the property's going to be worth more. The person I'm renting it to literally isn't going to be making me a dime on my money. They're just going to be paying the mortgage, and I pray to God that the value of the house goes up, because it's the only way I'm going to make money. I'm really not going to make that much money except in a little bit of payments this guy's making. And if you were doing that in 2016 when this tax came out, or in 2017 when everything started to level off, all of a sudden you'd be like my girlfriend's neighbor, where you'd buy a home for $2 million and now you're out 20% on that property and you're down $500,000. And that works on any spectrum. Obviously, if the numbers are a little smaller, in a $500,000 home, you'd only be losing about $100,000. But at the end of the day, there is no money in housing. I don't get it. I've been analyzing and looking, and there's so much new build going on around here everywhere. Condos are going up left, right, and center. They're being slapped together really cheaply. They're starting to fall apart, and we're in this weird balance. And what I want to do, like I said, is I'm not happy with the way Canada's being run right now. We've had a lot of opportunities with the marijuana markets, and we've destroyed those. Everything here has just become very bleak and non-growth and non-business derived to help people like myself as entrepreneurs grow the economy. And it bothers me that when my parents were 23, they bought this farm working regular jobs. I make a really good income. I make usually between $40,000 to $60,000 a year as an individual, and I can't even afford a home, and I have $100,000 plus in the bank. Welcome to my reality, guys. I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know in the comment section below if you learned anything interesting today, and slap a like. I'd love to hear your opinion on what you think about all of this and maybe something that I missed. I just really wanted to make this video because it's been frustrating me to no end. So stay cool, stay awesome, guys. I look forward to chatting to you real soon.